How's it going, friends and family? My name is Amos, and it's time for another portfolio roast session. And this one's going to be more relatable than you might think. And by the way, for those of you that are wondering, are these fake? Are these made up? Am I just throwing hypothetical scenarios out there? No. These are real portfolios that are submitted for review by viewers like you. If you like what you see, you can give it a go with the Google form that's going to be in the pinned comment and video description. Please do not submit your request asking for a free portfolio review. Please do me a solid. Don't do that. I barely get any views on my videos as it is. To do a free portfolio review, right? And I just want to throw this out there. I bit my tongue while chewing my food the other day, so it's hard for me to pronounce some words. Like in the bottom of my tongue, it's still bleeding. It sucks. And that's because I was half asleep while eating. If you're out of the loop, I have a 4-week-old newborn, and sleep is just something I really wish I would have taken advantage of leading up to her being born, but that's neither here or there, because today we are going to be looking at Parker's portfolio. He's 47 years old, and he's a senior talent acquisition specialist. So he's the dude that filters your resume when you apply for a new job. He puts it through AI, and if you don't meet the keywords from the job description, you're never going to get a chance. And it's his job to go through LinkedIn to find the proper candidate for whatever listing, okay? However, on the weekends, he uploads his beats on SoundCloud because his dream job is to be a DJ rather than a corporate guy that works on contract to contract. Because most talent acquisition folks, they don't have a steady paying job. It's usually like a 6, 12, or 18-month contract, and they're usually a 1099 employee. But whatever. He likes to shower naked, and he has a size 31 waist. For a 47-year-old, I think that's pretty impressive. Okay, I'm in my mid-30s, and my waist is about a 29. Like if I have a buffet, all you can eat sushi, we might be talking about 30, but 29 on a good day, but that's because I'm still relatively young. At 47, if my waist can be 31, I'll be pretty happy. And for what it's worth, he started investing into the stock market about 4 years ago, so he's not a rookie by any means. He showed me what his portfolio looked like in the beginning, and it wasn't a pretty picture. However, right now, it's not bad at all. So we're going to be treating this portfolio roast session as if it's an MBA case study, which means we're going to be taking a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. But do keep in mind, even though this is a real portfolio, nothing in this video, nothing on this YouTube channel, nothing is considered financial advice or personal advice. This is all going to be just for fun. Because I'm a blatant idiot, and I quite literally sit down to pee, because sometimes when I get up in the middle of the night, I'm so freaking tired, I don't want to bother pissing all over the seat, okay? So I'd rather just sit down and pee. Now, with that said, what does Parker's portfolio look like? So what you see on your screen right now, he has 10 holdings across 6 different brokerage accounts. The total valuation of his portfolio, give or take, about $150,000. Okay, depending on when you wash this, it could be as high as 160, it could be as low as 145. In the current situation, so based on the rumors that are going around Parker's office, he expects to be laid off by Q2 2026. And as we can see, if you take a look at his portfolio ranging from VGT, all of the IT and tech stocks, to Meta, Nvidia, Amazon, Google, his portfolio is almost entirely concentrated in tech. Big tech. And that's up until now. He's realizing, like, with this scenario happening, it might behoove of him to switch gears. So the question here is whether a transition to dividend-growth ETFs is going to be the right move, especially in light of a pending layoff. And Parker's second ask is whether or not his current holdings make sense. He does not care about performance because he knows that if he has the right holdings, his total return will follow suit. And to be honest with you, I can't argue with that one. That's a pretty sound philosophy. If you buy tactically sound, high quality, beautiful compounders, you don't really need to be sweating and losing sleep on when is the right time to buy into freaking SCHD or SBMO, or VT-SAX, which is a mutual fund that emulates VTI. Same with this one, and the portfolio goal was super growth oriented up until this circumstance. Now, Parker's wanting a more balanced approach and a more balanced take, because that's 100% into tech, except I guess the VTI kind of gives them that diversification across the board. But for the most part, besides the 401k and the HSA account, it's all in tech. And the portfolio strategy, Parker made it clear to me that he does not want to sell his existing holdings, but instead he wants to achieve this alternative goal by reallocating future contributions to the new setup. And you might be like, what do you mean a new setup? More on that to follow. So on a very high level, what are my thoughts and opinions before we go through the scorecard and then what I would do to modify the portfolio? I think this is the perfect case and example of why dividend growth investing just makes so much sense. It doesn't matter if you're 21, 47, or even 62. Because life, sometimes it can hit you really hard. Unexpected setbacks happen all the time. You can get diagnosed with an illness tomorrow. You could get into a car accident, catastrophic events. We feel like we're invincible, but it can happen to anyone. So when life takes a turn, when your wife cheats on you and you got to go through a divorce or you get laid off, the dividends that are paid out from your brokerage account, it can tuck you in at night to help ease a bit of that stress off of your narrow clavicles. Because if you're only going into hyper growth and you don't have a steady passive income, then you're going to be scrambling around to find or to sell your assets to generate a synthetic dividend. And we don't want to be doing that, right? Sometimes you want to let our winners ride. With a dividend growth investing portfolio, friends and family, you don't have to sell anything. You can let your winners ride while you pocket the paychecks. Does that make sense? So if you are a dividend hater, Parker's situation can happen to absolutely anyone. Layoffs happen all the time. I've been on both sides of that experience, and it's not fun. Okay? It's not. So growth makes sense until life hits you right in the gonads. And that's why I'm a dividend growth investor. Now, with that said, let's segue on over to the scorecard of this portfolio. All right, so the first criteria metric is going to be the asset and strategy fit. Like, do the positions and holdings make sense for their goal? I think it made absolute sense for their previous goal, right? But for the new goal of generating some passive income, it does not. Okay, so I'm going to be evaluating it from the previous goal because it's not fair for me to be like, oh, the dividend payout is really subpar, so I'm going to give it a D. Like that's evil work, okay? So overall, I would say it's an A+ as it stands right now. Like I just alluded to with the previous goal of growth, it's about as good as it gets. However, if we're going to be talking about dividend growth, it's not really optimized. I mean, I take that back. SCHD is okay, but the payout is not that great. But then again, you don't really invest into SCHG for the dividend payout. You invest into it for the CAGR. However, the new setup, I know I keep talking about the new setup without revealing it. It should look a lot better, and that's going to be towards the second half of the video, okay? And for anyone else that's all in to tech, kind of like Parker, I get it. And that's why I'm saying an A+. Because given the trends in AI dominance, and especially 2025, I feel like every other sector and industry is being corrected. Like the PE ratios across the board are being shaved, right? When we think about all the hyper-growth restaurant companies like Chipotle, Shake Shack, Texas Roadhouse, everyone's valuations and prices are being shaved. When we think about fintech companies like PayPal, Fiserv, XYZ, they're also being shaved. Everybody across the board is being shaved except for the big tech that's involved with the tip of the spear of the AI movement. So going heavy into the tech sector, yeah, it might be the move for now. And I can't fault him or your wife's boyfriend for prioritizing going balls deep into tech. That's why I'm saying it's an A+. However, it's really important to note that historically, the various sectors and industries, they take turns being the top dogs. But in my stupid opinion, AI, cloud, cybersecurity, and big tech. When I say big tech, I'm referring to like Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Meta. I feel like the ones that I just mentioned, those are the biggest opportunities for at least the next 10 years. Now, having said that, at one point, believe it or not, the best sector to put your money into was the finance space. The big banks, they were the killers of the stock market until the Great Recession. And then at one point, real estate was pound for pound the best performance in terms of a CAGR. Now, because of the high interest rate environment, real estate, they've been suffering for the past 4 years, and now they're lagging behind tech. So right now, Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, the stuff that Parker's invested into, they're leading and shaping the future with all of their various projects and endeavors. So I like his portfolio a lot, especially if your aim and mission is for growth. That's not financial advice. It's just one idiot's opinion. And when we think about the level of risk ranging from 0 to 10, 10 being you're going into a freaking casino and pulling that slot machine. 1 is basically investing into bonds and putting your money into CDs and a high yield savings account. I think Parker's portfolio as it stands right now without any modifications is a 3 out of 10. I think it's moderately safe, but one could argue moderately risky as well, but not too bad. And the reason being is that he has beautiful holdings across the board. I'll be honest with you, I had never heard of Granny prior to Parker's portfolio, and once I looked into it, I gave it a head nod. I was literally showering naked, and I was like, not bad. Now, having said that, being gung-ho into big tech and associated funds to tech and having nothing else means no coverage when the market rotates. And that's why some people would argue to diversify your portfolio in a way that, like right now, SCHD is an underdog in the dividend community. Whereas like 5 years ago, they were the kings, right? So I feel like everything eventually comes in balance. What's hot today may not be hot tomorrow. What's ugly today could be the shiny gem in the future. However, considering Parker's portfolio, these are some really good, high-quality household names. So I would argue if his portfolio is in the red, then the overall market is probably also going to be in the red, like the April 2025 sell-off or the pandemic sell-off. Like, if his portfolio is going to be taking a hit, everybody else is going to be taking a hit as well. So I might even adjust that to like a 2.5 out of 10, but let's just leave it as it is, 3 out of 10. And when we think about the quality of holdings ranging from an F all the way to an A, now don't take this the wrong way, but I genuinely think the quality of Parker's holdings, dude, it's an S. And I'm not afraid to say it, but I can tell that you did a crap ton of research and your homework because you curated your capital into the best of the best, in my opinion. And I don't say that lightly. Because usually when you take a look at someone's portfolio, there's always an eyesore, a blemish, a pimple, a tumor, something that's kind of ugly. Like everything could be pretty. Like he could have 25 holdings, 24 are pretty, and then he'll have one very questionable, deep in the red, negative 70%, and he's just holding on to it. And it's just like, dude, what the heck happened here? And it's usually because of a rookie mistake or one of the first investments that they made once they got their feet wet. But I don't see anything here where I would be like, dude, that's absolutely hideous. So for me to give an S rating, honestly, if you're naked right now, take your bare hand and give yourself a pat on the back and then your bum. Because I'm actually really proud of you. And I say that as a dividend growth and a value investor who is not invested into Meta, Nvidia, or even Google. I don't have them in my own portfolio. But real recognizes real, and your holdings are very high quality. You're not messing around with value traps or growth traps, and I give you props where props is due. And even with your ETF representation, again, I think it's best in class. So it's really hard to say who is better when you compare your own holdings against each other, but I will give my 2 cents here in a little bit. Because Parker's not really focused on income, I just went ahead and put not available. So now I think it's to the exciting part of the video. So what would I do differently if I had to improve this portfolio as an MBA case study assignment? Like the professor is grading and then evaluating based on my suggestions. This is just for fun. And I'm a guy that tries to listen to the stakeholders. In this case, it's you, right? The viewers, but more particular, Parker. And I know you don't want to make drastic changes. This is what the portfolio looks like right now, but this is what I would do, especially for future contributions and if I could sell. Okay, so jump on over to the next spreadsheet. I would delete VGT all the way down to the individual holdings of the Mag 7, and I would reallocate 50% into SCHG, 40% into FDVV, which is the Fidelity High Dividend ETF, or SCHD. By the way, when I say SCHG, I think you might be better off with SPIMO, right? I think either one, you can't go wrong, but also a NASDAQ 100 income ETF that gives you a little bit of that share price appreciation plus a juicy 10 to 13% dividend yield. My pick, based on my analysis, is the Goldman Sachs variety. Yes, the NEOS QQQI has a higher yield, but the G-pick, which is the Goldman Sachs NASDAQ 100 income ETF, it has better capital preservation. So being mindful of your current situation with the pending layoff that may or may not come, 50% into growth, 40% into a very high quality dividend growth ETF, and then 10% into a very high dividend yield payer that may or may not have a juicy dividend growth rate. But I think they kind of balance each other out. But please do keep in mind, this is not financial advice, and I'm just talking to myself. I'm crazy, I'm a lunatic, I might be schizo. However, with that said, given your age, you've still got a solid 10 or 15 years of work in you for you to put a butt in a seat and collect a paycheck. Maybe 5 more on top of that if you really want to squeeze that last bit of toothpaste out. So I think from 47 to whenever you do decide to press that button to clock out of work permanently, I think this setup right here is what I would personally do. I feel like it's fundamentally sound. And the reason being is that when I was a young military officer, I know I look like a baby face, but imagine 15 years ago how much younger I looked, okay? One piece of advice that really helped me was to KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. The reason why I crossed out some of the other ETFs in your portfolio is because I think there's a lot of overlap in the ETFs, especially with the holdings and the stocks that are represented. So I just narrowed it down to the ones that I believe are pound for pound the best. And having just said that sentence right now, I know it triggered some people because you might be a fanboy of Granny. You might be a fanboy of VGT and you're gonna be like, you're an idiot. What do you know? Why would you put SCHD when blah, blah, blah? And that's why all of this investing stuff, personal finance, is so fun. Everyone is entitled to your own opinion, right? But I'm not just gonna leave it like that, okay? We're gonna be taking a closer look at each ETF and my reasoning after we take a look at Parker's dividend situation. So if he in fact does go into it like this, let me show you a more pretty format. Let me zoom in. This is 150, 175. This would be the revised portfolio, $154,300. $154,316 if I were to make my modifications in a perfect world. And the allocations like this, I feel like would be perfect. Now, obviously, I left these two alone because depending on your employer or the account itself, like is it Bank of America, is it Charles Schwab, the mutual funds that you can pick from, I get it. Sometimes the options are not the greatest, so you gotta pick with what's available. Now, if we take into consideration just those 3 holdings of FDVV, you could literally substitute this with SCHD, GPIC, and SCHG, and the following amount of money thrown into it. Jump on over to the dividends. This would be the dividend situation. A 2.3% dividend yield, $2,400 in dividends annually, or in other words, that would be about $205 every month. And when we take a look at the dividend distribution, obviously because we have 40% of our capital into FDVV, or this could be SCHD as well, they're responsible for about $1,200 out of that $2,400, and then the GPIC, even though they only make up 10%, this is why high income dividend ETFs are kind of cool. They're responsible for about $1,000. And then obviously SCHG, I said it again and I'll say it one more time, even though it's 50% of the capital, you only get $185. But if you are investing into SCHG for the dividends, I don't know if you're playing the game in the right fashion. But I mean, come on, $200 a month? I feel like that could go a far way. And by the way, you asked, is it good to have a specific quantity to be a goal to chase, like 1,000 shares of SCHD or whatever? I think it is. I think that is a realistic and a good goal. Like, I have 200 shares right now. In the future, I want 500. I think that's a really fun way to do drip and to see your portfolio just keep growing with the dividends that are paid out. Having said that, an even better goal is a specific payout, and to use that payout for something to make it fun. For pizza nights, to pay for Netflix, to buy more shares, to pay for your utility bill, and whatnot. Because when you think about it, if your goal is like, I want to generate at least $250 every month, you could utilize that $250 to knock out your cell phone bill, internet bill, or whatever, right? Those bills you don't even have to worry about anymore. You could just use the dividend distributions. Again, huge advocate and supporter and a believer of dividends. So I am very freaking biased. Now, having said that, let's go line by line and talk about why we went from this to this, okay? First up, I want to talk about Granny. Ticker symbol GRNY, and it's the fund strat, Granny Shots US large cap ETF. Why is it called Granny Shots? If you grew up playing basketball, at least here in the States, there's something called a granny shot where it's kind of like a YOLO free throw, where, you know, when you shoot basketball, you have one hand on the side as a support and you use your dominant hand as like that perfect little flick of the wrist, right? But with a granny shot, demonstration purposes, you literally do an underhand toss, close your eyes and say, YOLO. It's basically how a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old would shoot a basketball because they don't have that bicep and tricep strength to do it the right way. Because if you do it like this, there's a lot more power because it's generated from the hips. But anyways, taking a look at their total stock market history, it's really new, okay? They just debuted in the stock market in November 2024, so it's only been around for about a year. And it's an actively managed ETF by Tom Lee. And I would argue it's a pretty good strategy of investing into trends such as like the labor shortage because of AI, automating away jobs, or taking advantage of seasonality. Like if you know advertising budgets are really hot during the fourth quarter, like you would pump your money into advertising stocks or even cybersecurity attacks. So essentially, Tom Lee looks at these trends and he picks the stocks that are best positioned to benefit from those events. However, I do want to call out that a very short history. Now, if you are a friend of the channel, then you know that I give really big brownie points when a stock or investment option at hand has a lot of DNA, timeline, and history for us to understand how they behave during a bear market, bull market, when the times are good, when the times are bad, and for us to see whether or not this is not just dumb luck. So for me, I'm deducting 1 point from the Granny ETF because the history is too short. And if we take a look at their holdings, I'm not going to argue here. I think it makes a lot of sense. Lamb Research, you can basically think of them as an alternative to ASML because they're in the business of selling machinery to make semiconductor chips. There's Google, Caterpillar, AMD, Tesla. I'm not going to lie to you, these are not bad. However, having said that, I think he relies too heavily on the story to make up the constituents of the portfolio rather than looking at objective hard data as a screening metric of like, he should come in or he should leave. For me, I feel like the story and the narrative makes up about like 20% of my investing decision-making process. But to be 100% of it, I'm kind of like, you know what I'm saying? I'm more of a data and numbers kind of guy. So I don't see eye to eye with Tom Lee. And that's why I ultimately deleted them from the portfolio. The next ETF that I want to talk about and do a deep dive on is SCHG. I think I went ahead and said that it could be SPMO or SCHD. I'll be honest with you, I really love this one. And I say that because I think all of your bases are going to be covered with SCHG because it prioritizes the big dogs in the stock market, the Schwab's US Large Cap Growth ETF. They don't care about the small caps. They don't care about startups. They only invest into the very high quality compounders that are absolutely juicy. I mean, their top 10, beautiful. I think the only one that I don't really like is Eli Lilly, but the next one makes up for it. I love Visa. I love Netflix, MasterCard, Palantir. So out of the top 20, I love everything except Eli Lilly. These are really high quality compounders that should outperform, at least for the next 6 months at a minimum. But for the foreseeable future, you can't really argue with this. I think they're all pretty high quality. And again, I'll go on record by saying a good alternative is SPMO, but to be honest with you, like comparing SCHG to SPMO is like comparing a very solid Honda that's really fun to drive to a high quality Toyota. They're both really reliable vehicles in their own right. You can't go wrong with either one. Now, having said that, let's talk about SPMO, otherwise known as the Invesco S&P 500 Momentum ETF. It's kind of similar to Granny, except that it has a lower expense fee baked in, and instead of a narrative or a story that's driving who belongs in the portfolio, SPMO, the fund tries to hand select stocks by using objective data to filter companies in and out of the portfolio based on momentum. And if we take a look at the holdings, absolutely juicy, beautiful. I like what I see here, okay? And the best part is, if you jump on over to the stock market history, look at that. We have so much more data to work with. It was publicly listed back in 2015, at the end of 2015, 10 years of data to work with. So we know how they behave and how they perform over the long run. With Granny, if they had at least 5 years of history, I feel like I would have kept them in, okay? But 1 year of history during a really big bull market, it's kind of hard to assess whether or not Tom Lee knows what he's doing, okay? Maybe he does, maybe he does not. Now, the next one that I want to talk about is going to be very controversial because I do like VGT, but if I really had to nitpick among the peers that he's sharing your portfolio with, I feel like, you know what I'm saying? He's kind of, it's great, but it's missing a lot of compounders that are beautiful. And what I mean by that is if I jump on over to the holdings tab, the expense ratio for this guy, negligible. But he has some of the Mag 7 represented, but not all of them. And what I mean by that is with VGT, you don't have exposure to Google. You don't have exposure to Amazon. There's no Meta, and there's no Tesla, to just name a few, right? I mean, they have some of the other big dogs in the tech space, like Adobe, Texas Instruments, Lam Research, Oracle. Great. But to only have 3 out of the 7 in the Mag 7, I feel like even if you hate the Mag 7, the reason why they're called the Magnificent 7 is because they perform. They're able to walk the talk. They don't just have a label because they're pretty. They have a label because they just kick booty. And the reason why I went ahead and picked FDVV or SCHD, either one of them would work for the dividend growth ETF, is because this, okay? With uncertainty up ahead, it's not a terrible idea to build up the income payers and chase stability rather than just going strictly on growth, right? And I feel like FDVV is so freaking juicy. I feel like there's a lot of hype surrounding DGRO, DIVO, and SCHD for the right reasons. I get it. But why is there no respect when it comes to the Fidelity High Dividend ETF? Because check this out. If I jump on over to their dividend tab, a 3% dividend yield, dividend growth rate of 22%. And the average PE ratio of the holdings is a little less than 20. Dude, that's freaking phenomenal. I love it. And the constituents of this ETF are made up from the Fidelity's high dividend index, as you can see right there. So it's very subjective, but I think they're doing a really good job of picking pretty solid companies. Because FDVV, they have Nvidia, they have Apple, Microsoft, Broadcom, JP Morgan Chase. Dude, sign me up. And I would be just as hyped talking about SCHD. And then as I just alluded to with the mutual funds, I mean, I don't really have too much commentary because as an American, I understand the limitations. Sometimes the options that they give you, it's like 10 different choices, like a bond fund, a money market fund, an S&P 500 fund, a Russell 2000 index fund. And for you to pick the ones that are VTI, I think it's not bad because I think it gives you diversification across the board. VTI is tactically sound. Obviously, the name is not VTI, but those mutual funds are the exact same thing as VTI. Tactically sound. Me, personally, I would swap out those VTI lookalikes for the mutual funds that are most similar to the S&P 500. That's just what I would do, okay? Just as a reminder, taking a look at the ones that I picked to optimize this portfolio, let's take a look at their performance. So the reason why I say that you can't go wrong with either SPMO or SCHG is because, check this out. Let's let their numbers do the talking, okay? Past 1 year, obviously, SPMO outperforms, okay? If we zoom out 5 years, 150 to 125. If we zoom out 10 years, it's pretty much identical. Over the long run, 433% total return across the board. And that's why I'm saying either one is not bad. If we take a look at their compound annual growth rate for the past 10 years, 17.8% for SPMO and then 17.88% for SCHD. Over the long run, they're pretty much the same thing. In the short run, SPMO does have the upper hand. Again, it's like a Toyota versus a Honda. Okay? And then the next one is the dividend growth ETFs, right? I said you can't go wrong with SCHD or FDVV. I think either one, pretty solid. Obviously, in the short run, the Fidelity one is just phenomenal because of their portfolio holdings, right? Nvidia, Microsoft, and all that. With SCHD, they usually have the more value-oriented companies like the oil and gas players, the pharmaceuticals, and they're kind of lagging behind right now. So that kind of explains why they're not doing as hot. But if we zoom out and look at the long run, it's pretty much the exact same scenario, right? 200% to 200% over 10 years. And then, of course, the last one, the NASDAQ 100 high-income ETFs. Again, you can't go wrong with either one. Personally, I would give first place to the Goldman Sachs variety and flavor, but I think the NEOS QQQI is just as good. If we take a look at it past 1 year, 19.8% to 19.8%. Again, you can't go wrong with either one. And some other thoughts that I had while filming before I lose my train of thought. Amigo to amigo, Parker, especially with the pending layoff, I would start updating your resume. Just don't wait for you to be called into the office with HR and they're like, hey, we're letting you go. We'll give you a 2-week, maybe even an 8-week severance package, and then you're caught with your pants hanging down your ankles. Don't do that, right? I would say be proactive, update your resume. Literally, spend your time at work right now looking for job listings and start interviewing with peer companies. And even if you don't get fired, for anyone who's still watching, I think it's really healthy to interview every 2 years to get a good gauge of your market value and compensation. Like, you might be a happy camper doing what you do for like $85,000 and you get a measly, 2-3% raise at the end of the year based on your performance or whatever. But by pivoting to an adjacent role at another company, dude, your $85,000 could literally bump up to like 110, 115. Same exact role, just a different hat, like a different uniform. You might be working for X, but if you move on over to Y, the compensation goes up. However, if you feel ambitious and you feel like you're crushing it and your resume is just really beautiful, you can move up and interview for a position that's slightly above you, like one above you, one pay grade above you. Like if you're a senior manager interviewing for a director role, or if you're currently a director interviewing for a senior director role, and then moving up to vice president and so forth. And so using that exact same example, if you're making like $85,000 right now, all in, including the end of the year bonus and whatnot, if you move up by jumping ship or applying to positions in your same company and moving up the ladder, dude, your compensation could literally double overnight. We're talking about like $160,000. I'm not joking. As you move up the pay grade, the compensation packages get really crazy. When you think about the compensation packages of most Fortune 100 CEOs, we're talking about like 50 million, 30 million. The low ones are probably like a single digit number. And then it just trickles on down from there, right? So moving up the ladder is a pretty wise move to like double your compensation with the lowest amount of effort. And I say that because whenever I hear stories of people trying to juggle 2 to 3 jobs, having a main job that you put in 50 hours a week and then having side hustles, I'm like, bro, just crush it at your main paying job, the one that you like the most, and move up the ladder. I feel like that's the most tactically sound way. And if you can't, because your supervisor plays favoritism or you know that you suck, it might be best to jump ship to restart your reputation, a blank slate, right? That way you're not capped. Moving up is the best and easiest way to get more money. It's not by taking on more jobs, not taking on more side projects. okay? That's the fastest and most efficient way to dramatically increase your compensation. And I'm saying that as a guy who used to say the exact same stuff to the people that reported to me. Because I can magically wave my wand and help get them, like a 9 or 10% increase in their salary, but I can't do like 20, 30%. And so I would always advise them like, dude, I know you're happy here and you're crushing it, but I see so much freaking potential in you, man. I think if you start interviewing with XYZ, and usually they would heed my advice, jump ship, move up the ladder, and I get an email like a year or two later, they're like, dude, thank you so much for giving me, the encouragement to not just play it safe and for me to spread my wings and fly. Like those are my favorite types of follow-up communications. Because I want to say this right now. If you're throwing down 80 to 90 hours of your week dedicated to work because you're juggling like 2 to 3 jobs, like you work a salary job, you're driving for Uber, and you're doing this and that, you could do that. Or the alternative is by interviewing and jumping ship, you could work less hours, like 45 or 50 hours, while doubling your compensation, okay? So that's just where my head is at. Obviously, just take everything that I said with a grain of salt because I've been pretty far removed from corporate America. It's been a while since I jumped ship, so maybe the ball game is entirely different now. Now, having said that, before I get out of here, I just want to say this. I appreciate you guys submitting your portfolios to be roasted because I think there's value add on both sides, right? That small fee, though, talking from my side, it honestly goes a long way, especially right now with a newborn at home. When we think about diapers, wipes, doggy pee pads, the costs start to add up. Now, having said that, why do I recommend doggy pee pads? Check this out. I'm talking about literal doggy pee pads. Let me give you some advice from someone that's going through the newborn trenches right now. If you and your partner, you're expecting your first baby, my advice is to buy some doggy training pads. And then you change your baby's diaper on top of that. Because whatever happens, a blowout, there's poop all over the place, or she's pissing all over you, or he's pissing on you, that doggy pee pad will soak everything up. And whatever's underneath, that surface, that baby changing matter, whatever, will be clean, will be spotless. And especially if you're expecting a boy. Because apparently they like to shoot that jet stream right at your face. With a girl, it drizzles downward, so it's not as bad, but it gets all over the place. So a doggy pee pad, I'm telling you right now, hands down, more people need to start recommending doggy pee pads, especially if you've never interacted or if you're not good with newborns, especially with changing diapers. Now, all that to say, your support means a lot. And I do not take it for granted. I'm talking about the ones that are on Patreon. I'm talking about the ones that submitted your portfolios for review. I'm talking about the ones that are silently supporting the channel by clicking like or even commenting. And I say that because out of all of the YouTube channels out there, the fact that you made it to the end of this video means that you're taking a dump on the toilet that's taking forever, or you're stuck in traffic while you commute to work, or you're just having a good time with me. And I feel pretty happy to know that someone else out there is enjoying the same stuff that I enjoy. Okay, I'm talking too much. I love you guys. I'll talk to you next time. Stay safe. Good luck in the stock market. And let me know what you think of Parker's portfolio. What suggestions would you make? How do you think I did on this MBA case study? Okay, peace.